thank you, Thompson, for being here, first of all. This is our episode number 5, I believe, in the series of Universal Thought podcast. That's what we named it. We're trying to get different people from different areas to talk about their own experience in Australia and maybe probably give an insight about how their journey was and how they probably managed to get into different stages here in Australia and in this case leadership. So I've done a little bit of research about you, Thompson. So you are a former president of CISA, I believe, Council of International Students Australia.
Yeah, so I was a founding delegate, in fact.
Okay.
In 2010, when CISA was first created,
Yeah.
there were about 80 international student leaders from universities and colleges across Australia.
Yeah.
We were in Hobart, Tasmania, at the University of Tasmania in July 2010, and we represented altogether 52 student organizations, which eventually became a founding member organizations of CISA. And I was part of CISA until 2015. So throughout the 5 years, I was the secretary, and eventually I became the president of CISA.
Yeah. So because I have also had a little bit of understanding about CISA as an organization, as a peak body of international students itself. And if you had to say, how would CISA help international students, and what are the things they normally do to help students, the international students specifically, and represent them? So what would be those few things you reckon?
So let's look at the constitution of CISA, because as a founding delegate, I had the privilege of co-drafting the constitution, which is an important document for any organization, right? And if you look at the objective of the constitution of the organization, the first objective, it says to promote and advocate for the interest and welfare of international students, whether it is in university or colleges, vocational education training, TAFE, private colleges, and also the English language students. So a very simple word to describe that is, it is a voice for international students across Australia, regardless of whether you study in university or private colleges or TAFE or English language college. More importantly, it is an advocacy body. And when we say advocacy, we focus on issues and challenges that international students face, right? For example, employability. For example, workplace exploitation, accommodation exploitation, all sort of things. But I think more importantly, over the years, CISA has positioned itself as a national peak body that is sitting on various influential decision-making or advisory board. For example, the Council of International Education, which is chaired by the Ministers of Education. And these are very influential platform for CISA representative to actually make recommendations and also to provide some feedbacks and raise issues about international students to key decision makers.
Sure. Wow. I mean, that is a lot of work you guys are doing, and the organization is doing. And
that's right.
You being at the very beginning and the inception of the organization, I believe is very useful for a lot of international students. And because we also deal with a lot of international students. In fact, that's our business, and that's what we do. We place them in different institutions, and we be with them through their entire process of getting the degree, and probably also assist them in bridging that gap between getting a degree and moving on to into the workforce. So I mean, there are some issues which we normally we see about international students, and some of them which we can see from our perspective of our business or industry is that there's this sort of lack of I would say confidence when they come in at the very beginning, and they're not fully able to express themselves, and they feel like they're in a bit of a different place, and they're trying to find out how you can go into the forefront. I'll talk about the leadership later on, but obviously during your tenure as well, and I believe you still working around international students, and you've been interacting with them. So what are the few things you could really see which really is troubling them? I could say, or maybe a few things which they could really work upon to break that ice and become more confident. So what is your experience with the international students?
Look, these are some of the important issues that you have unpacked over there on the issue of confidence.
Yeah.
So I'll just use my journey as an example.
Sure.
Now, when I first came to Australia, I was originally from Malaysia.
Yeah.
And in Malaysia, even though we learned English in our school when we were in primary school, but it's not something that is commonly spoken, right? So we learn the basic, the grammar, the sentences. We know how to construct simple essays. But English essentially is my third language.
Yeah.
Right. So my mother tongue is Mandarin, and then we speak Bahasa or Malay, which is our national language. English comes third. So when I first arrived in Australia, just like many other international students, communicating in English to your lecturers or to your friends or to a cafe manager trying to order your coffee, those are pretty scary things if you think about it, but especially when in your first few days or first few weeks in Australia.
Sure.
But over the years, I've also come to realization that this whole definition of confidence is not as straightforward as everyone think, because there's some cultural aspect on that.
Yes.
Right? So when somebody say that they're not comfortable to raise their hand and ask a question in the class to the lecturer, for example, does that mean that the person is not confident? Well, perhaps from an Australian point of view, they think that that's considered not confident because you don't have the courage to actually speak up. But you have to see from their cultural point of view. It could be a cultural thing because not everyone has grown up in a culture where you're upfront with everything.
Sure. Yeah.
Where you challenge the authority, where you raise questions, which is a big part of what Australian democracy is all about. Right? People go out to protest, people can address their senior by their first name. We didn't do that when I was in Malaysia. We respected somebody who is an elder. We call them uncle or auntie or Mr. or Mrs., right? Over here, you can call the Prime Minister by the first name. So there's some cultural implication in that, which I think is important for students, but also those stakeholders, the lecturers, the teachers, people who are working in the education sector to actually understand, and employers in particular, they need to know that, it doesn't mean that this person is not confident if he or she doesn't speak up or doesn't communicate properly. It's just perhaps there's some cultural element there. So I think it's very important that people understand from an international student lens.
So put yourself in other people's shoes before you
absolutely
and tailor probably your communication to So I mean, and I've been speaking with students since last few years, and one time I just wanted to know and I've spoken about this in one of my previous podcasts as well, and I would like to get your insight into it as well. And I was just because there's a new batch of students coming in, and they're not really communicating with me. I was asking questions, everybody's trying to hide, trying to look away and stuff like that. And I said, I asked them, like, what is it? And I believe, I told them, what I think is it's the fear of judgment, probably. That's what I feel. And you have to tell me, or you tell me, what do you think? And do you think if you speak up, you'd expose yourself and then people might make a certain judgment about you? And almost 75% said agreed to it. They said, yes, we really are not able to express at the very beginning because obviously, like you said, the language barrier, and they're not confident enough to what they're saying, and they feel like, they could be judged. And I said, I'm your teacher. I would be the last person to judge you. So you could be more expressive. And then again, slowly, that was a work I put in for a certain period of time. So do you think, and that happens to, I believe, a lot of people, even me, sometimes when I'm in a new environment and I have to express myself, I feel like, hey, what am I putting on the table, and what might that person see it as, you know? So do you think that is also one of the factor you reckon?
I think you're right about the fear of judgment,
Yeah.
how people perceive you. And it's pretty common. I mean, it happens to anyone else and everyone else, including myself as well. So it is particular real when you are first year international student, for example, from language aspect to, you know, it could be things like, what about my accent?
Yeah.
Right? And this is a big thing, because being able to communicate in English well, but with an accent, may possibly be perceived as not a good English speaker, right? Particularly from a local person's point of view.
Sure.
Because they're not familiar with that accent, which means that it becomes a communication barrier. Then people think that you're not communicating well enough. So it is a very difficult topic, really.
Yeah.
And that's why, you know, there are inventions like Kahoot. If you know about the tools called Kahoot, Kahoot,
Okay.
which is a live apps for teachers to ask questions and students can reply.
Okay.
And it pops up on the screen straight away.
Wow. Okay.
About what are their responses. So inventions like this actually do help. But also the other thing we got to understand is the new generation of students that we are dealing with.
Yep.
And I'm referring to specifically the generation Z.
Yeah.
Because my generation is the previous generation.
Previous one, yeah.
Right. Now the new generation Z, these are the generations that has grown up with YouTube and iPhones and iPads, which means that they may be keyboard warriors, they may be good in their screens and in their typing, in their written communication or text messages. But when it comes to verbal communication, face-to-face communication, is something that can be very scary for them. So I think this is something that the education sector, particularly teachers, would have to face in terms of how you actually engage your students more effectively. Is something that I think needs to be a little bit more creative for us to do that.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. And from my experience, I can say, well, we try different things, you know, because because the English requirement to study, for example, diploma is not very high. So it's just good enough to just get enrolled and do their assessment tasks and all of that. And we expect them to develop it over the time, over the course, over the period of, you know, that particular course. So yeah, it has been challenging. And but again, like you said, while we speak to the new generation, again, like, you know, being in their shoes and trying to understand how they perceive, you know, a certain, you know, means of communication, for example, and how you can really bring them out of that shell, because eventually writing skills or reading skills is not just good enough. Only having those skills, you need to be able to, you know, be there in person, start speaking. I believe, and there are too many, a lot of other factors as well in terms of developing that interpersonal skills.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, as a provider, I believe, yes, it's the responsibility, and also the responsibility of other people who they look up to, the leaders and stuff like that.
I think it's all about the environment.
Yeah.
Are we creating enough environment, the right environment, to nurture the students? Yeah. When I said nurture, I mean allow them to make mistakes, but also to educate them to flourish. Yeah. Right? And a role model is so important nowadays, as you say, particularly in the younger generation. Yeah. People like to have somebody that they can look up to, and then, wow, this is the person that I wanted to be in 10 years' time, for example. So tap into that trend and see how we can prepare that path for students to actually follow. And that requires a little bit of creativity there as well.
Sure. Beautiful. Well, I believe I'll talk a little bit about, because you've been a leader yourself in different organizations throughout the years. And I feel like, again, that confidence, you know, lack of confidence at the very beginning, and to break that ice, sometimes students take a lot of time. And So what was your journey like? How did you like break that ice and, you know, started going into leadership and, you know, being probably the face of a certain group of people and advocating their issues. So how did you make that switch at the very beginning?
You know, I've always described my international student journey with one word. That is transformational.
Wow. Okay.
It has been a process, a transformational process for me personally as an individual.
Yeah.
Now, why do I say that? Now, before I came to Australia, I don't have confidence to speak in front of even a group of 5 people or 10 people.
Yeah.
Not to say 100, 200, 500 or 1,000.
Sure.
So I've always got that fear of being judged.
Yeah.
What if I said something wrong? What if I said something stupid and people think of me being stupid, for example?
Yeah.
So that fear is always there until one person who is at my university at that point of time. So I studied at Curtin University in Sydney. That time there was a Sydney campus.
Yeah.
And is a marketing director. So he invited me to give some experience sharing session because he invited educational agents to the school. Sure. And back then, of course, when the borders were open and everything, you know, they normally do the familiarization tour where they invite education agents come to the university to experience the campus. So I was invited as a student leader. I was the president of the student council at my school at that time, and was invited to
at Curtin University.
At Curtin University, because that was how I got involved with CISA. Because you have to be at least a student leader at your campus before you got invited to get involved in the national level. Yeah. And then after the presentation, his name is James, and he told me because he noticed that I was shivering, my voice are shivering, and he knew that I was nervous. So after the presentation, he pulled me to the side and he said that, you know, I know that you're nervous. What are you worried about? So I became silent. I said that I'm just nervous. And then he said, you got to remember one thing, right? When you are invited to speak, you must treat this as a privilege, as an honor. And you shouldn't worry about what other people think about you at the audience, because if they don't like your talk, they have the choice to walk out from the room. But they didn't. They sat there and they listened to you. So you have to remember that. So a simple message like this actually became a powerful message. It shifted my mindset because because I thought what he said was absolutely right. So I remember that, you know. So after that, the second point I wanted to make is about practice. So I think practice does build confidence and, you know, seeing other people speak, experiencing how they talk. I didn't go to, you know, things like Toastmasters and all this, by the way. So it's all just practices. And to eventually one day became CISA president, speak at a massive conference like the Australian International Education Conference. That was, you know, an honor and privilege, but I was really worried at the same time as well. I was really worried because it's massive.
Did you do that for the first time, like that huge scale? Or
So I remember this around 2013 when I first elected to become CISA president. Because before that I was a secretary. And as a secretary, you don't do a lot of public speaking. You do a lot of secretariat work. But when you're president, you're a spokesperson. People expect you to speak, right? And I was being told that, in fact, one of the close friends who runs some educational technology company, he was there in the audience. And he also gave me some feedback as well. He said that, look, you know what? Everyone is nervous when you go out to speak, including President Obama, for example. He used that because Obama was the president of USA at the point of time, right? And I was like, I wasn't really sure because I wasn't quite believe in what he said, right? I was like, how would Obama be
He
nervous?
sounds the most confident person
He's
in the
most- the
world.
most
He's got
confident
humor.
person.
He's got everything.
He got humor. He was
Yeah.
eloquent,
Yeah.
right? He used the right words, and it's so powerful when he spoke. But he said that it's true because he read some of his story, Obama's story, and everything. But he said one thing that Obama did was he actually practiced in front of the mirror.
Oh.
All right, he practiced in front of the mirror.
Yeah.
So he was just there. My friend was trying to encourage me to again remind. So I think people like these are helpful when they remind you and give you some tips. Of course, not every feedback and tips are relevant or constructive. You just have to decide which one is right and which one is not. But these people are really helpful. And after that, the more I practice, I became more confident. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's all about practice. Yeah. Even with the whole confidence thing, not just public speaking, but confidence
overall.
You're going to understand, particularly to your audience who are international students who are seeing these podcasts, right? In an Australian context, confidence is where you're not afraid to raise questions. Yeah. Confidence is where you're not afraid to speak up when you need to. Confidence is where you can walk straight up to your lecturers, or you can walk straight up to your employer and raise something that you need to raise. Yeah. So these are what confidence in an Australian context is what about. So don't be afraid to think that you may be perceived as rude. That's another thing, right? So
it's a very fine line, I think.
It's a very fine line because you don't want to offend somebody, particularly when you're trying to work out some conflict, especially when you have conflict with your manager or when you have conflict with your boss. How do you deal with that, right? If you don't raise, well, that's what I always tell people. If you don't raise up, then the issue will be there. It won't be resolved.
Yes.
So these are people skills, soft skills, but important human skills that personally I have developed, and I'm forever grateful to my journey in CISA. I spent, upon reflection, 7 years as an international student. Because I did both bachelor degree and master degree. 5 years out of 7 years, I was involved in student organizations. And I often joke that sometimes I felt that I learned so much more from being in student organizations than I learned from the textbook.
Yes.
Because these are human skills that you don't learn. But when you are in these extracurricular activities, so that's why I always encourage students to get involved in volunteering. I understand that people may be very occupied with your study. And of course, I cannot emphasize enough that study is always the top priority.
It is, yes, for sure.
But if there's a room for undertaking some part-time jobs and get involved in some student organizations, or if you don't have student organizations, in the cases like small private colleges, there are many other community groups out there that you should get involved in. Right? So I think these are things that really make an impact. And I think one thing that I always told myself was education overseas is a huge investment, particularly in Australia, for example.
Yes.
So you got to make full use of your value that you spent here. And when such a huge investment is being made, you're not coming here just to attend classes and then go home and play video games and go for some of the activities that may not necessarily enhance your values. I'm not saying that those are wrong. I mean, obviously, you need entertainment, you need leisure. Some people watch YouTube, some people watch Netflix, some people watch or play video games, computer games. Some people go for nice beaches and bushwalking, and these are all great things. But how do you then find a balance to make sure that you make the most out of the time you're here in Australia? Because you don't know if you'll be here for many years, right? So some people may, after they finish the study, have to go home. But while you're here, these are the things that really make a lot of difference and define what a world-class student experience is all about.
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, And one of our guests in one of our previous podcasts, Animesh, his name is, and he's a young, fresh graduate. He's just started working in an IT company, and we spoke to him about this, and he really said at the beginning, he was also not very confident, and while he was nearing, his completion of his degree in IT, then somebody, like you said, there's some inspiration everybody gets from somewhere, and then he realized that, hey, this degree alone, getting a credit or a distinction would not really, get the best out of me. So he said there's a lot of other things I did before I got placed into a very good company. And he talked about these things as well. Is he started thinking about training, for example, doing other online courses, short courses, this training, which helped add to his the arsenal of skills. And also he focused on networking as well, so going out, meeting people in the same industry who's done the same work, and getting inspiration from them, making contacts, and all of those things. So what you said is absolutely right. I think that's what I believe also students needs to focus on, is not just say you have 20 hours of class a week to maintain your visa or maintain academic requirements, but what other things you do around it, and how much you participate in probably enhancing that skill and probably making it more current and putting yourself out in plain sight for people to look at you and probably give you an opportunity or get you into help you get into the industry. So yeah, I think what you said is really valuable. And also you talked about how you gained the confidence and started leading a large group of people. CISA is quite big, I believe. There's a lot of international students, and representing all of them is a huge task for sure in terms of leadership. But leadership is not obviously easy. So it comes with its own challenges. Well, I believe they say it's probably easy to reach at the top, but it's very difficult to stay at the top and like be working with your highest level of efficiency and giving the best outcome. So what are the few challenges you believe there is in terms of leading a small team, a large group of people, and how do you probably overcome that? What do you think?
Look, I mean, leadership theory, whether you are leading 3 people or you're leading 30 people or you're leading 300 people, it's pretty much the same. The principle is the same. I must admit, I mean, through student organizations, I learn a lot as well. Of course, I made mistakes as well, particularly when you don't have a lot of experience leading a national peak body like CISA. That was a very steep learning curve for me, because I was leading a group of student leaders. Because CISA is an association of associations. You're a leadership organization that consists of leaders themselves, which means that each of my team members have their own leadership capacity. So how do you as a president then unite these leaders? All right, I mean, it's not easy to unite, otherwise there wouldn't be war in the worst.
For sure.
But unity is always, it's easier to say than done. And there are a lot of leadership theories out there. But I think one thing that I have really learned a lot with CISA and with any other community organizations that I'm involved in is that cross-cultural management. And it goes back to, I think, why it is such a fantastic experience being an international student in Australia, because you got a chance to not just meet and know people from different countries, different cultural background, different religious background, but also to work with them in a team and get to learn about how you interact. I think a cultural master or cultural guru is somebody who can really see things from the other person's cultural perspective. If somebody can achieve that, that is an absolute master. not everyone actually that I've met, including some of the leaders in corporate, in government, actually had that ability. Not many people actually had that cross-cultural leadership skills. But if somebody can achieve that, wow, you can go really far in your life. But despite all those, what people think what true leaders is all about, I got, I always like to ask people questions about values of leadership. But after my so many years of journey in leadership positions, I think the two values I personally believe what made great leaders, number one, integrity. And number two, empathy.
Yes. I was about to come to that word. I really want, yes.
But it's interesting because when I do talks as well, like when people invite me to talk to students or to young people or to the wider multicultural groups, which I'm very active in, when I ask people this question, like what is your thoughts about what a good leaders are? And people gave me things like visionary, charismatic, and all those sort of things. But I said, yeah, those are great. But I shared with them what I just said just now, and they were surprised.
Yeah.
Because it's such simple thing that people never thought about.
Yeah.
But it's actually very powerful.
It is.
Because unfortunately, a lot of good leaders or great leaders, they are lacking these two qualities.
Yes.
And that is what break the organization sometimes, because a great organization is all about having good leaders that bring the team together.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's no such thing as great organization.
Exactly. And absolutely, I loved when you talked about empathy. I think that is one thing we've been trying to communicate as well through all of our, and has been a central theme of all of our podcasts. And I mean, it's a coincidence, I believe, or I mean, it is that powerful of a value, is that a lot of our guests talked about empathy. I think that is very important, is to be in other people's shoes, have that emotional intelligence, try and understand people better from their perspective before making any decisions. And I believe
and judgment before making any judgment.
Judgment, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because we humans often like to make a mistake. Not to say like to make a mistake, but subconsciously often made a mistake, which is we tend to make judgment too fast.
Yep.
We tend to judge a book by its cover without understanding what are the real issues or whole issues all about.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't judge people just based on their words and actions without understanding the things that they've gone through. Right? They might have gone through some really bad time with family, with friends, with their career. There are reasons behind everything that we see. This is what I believe in. And it's important to really understand it as a good leader, particularly we're talking about good leaders, to understand what's going on in the person's life before we make a judgment. I think that's very important.
Yeah, sure. And a little bit about, again, we're talking about empathy, and I'm very close to that word, and I really want to understand it as better as I can while I'm moving ahead in my life. And in terms of leadership, when you said empathy, sometimes because leaders have to make decisions as well. They have to be very assertive with what they say as well. At the end of the day, they would be the one who is going to sign off, like yes or no, or maybe, or whatever. And then we talk about empathy. Now, do you think that could sometimes hinder your assertiveness towards certain decision making, because you are trying to be on other people's shoes so much that you probably lose the basic, the job of you as a leader.
Yeah.
So how do you balance that? Is there a fine line, you believe, or when do you decide that I have to be assertive? Well, regardless of probably someone others. So that part.
It's a very good question. I mean, you have to first understand the whole leadership journey is not easy, because at the end of the day, you can't please everyone for sure.
Yeah.
somebody used to tell me, if you want to do something that please everyone, don't be a leader.
Yeah.
Go sell ice cream.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Because everyone comes to you, if you're selling ice creams,
Yeah.
they come to you with happy face.
Yeah.
But not as a leader. So coming back to your question about how do you find that fine line or balance, being empathetic leader and making a strong decisions, I think you really have to go back to the basic. And when I said basic, it refers to simple things like, what is the goal of the organization, for example. Every decision that I've made, I use that formula. And I explained it very clearly to the team. I said that anything that we do or we make as a decision as a team, it needs to be made in the interest of the organization and also aligns with the objective of the organization. And to come back to your question on how do you balance that is, I think you have to communicate this to the team. And even though when a decision is being made, which may not be in favor of what they're hoping to achieve, at least there's a level of understanding of why that decision is being made. People don't like to not be involved or not be consulted, particularly when you're a leadership team or an executive team. People want to be consulted and have a say in everything we do. And if you actually go through that process properly, in my experience, most people would understand, unless the person's a troublemaker, which sometimes you may face. I'm not saying that everything's perfect in this world. I'm not perfect. Nobody is perfect. Everyone is you have your learning curve, you have your journey. As long as you make sure that you communicate very clearly upfront about your style of leadership, about why you're making certain things, then I think you are pretty much good enough.
No, sure, I mean, that is one thing that really I find a little tricky in terms of leadership as well. And obviously, it's not an easy job. And that's what I always think about as well, is that we are going for a collective goal and not individual goal. Because when you talk about leadership, it's about a team. And if it's an organization, it's like you said, it's got its goals, objectives, and every decision you make is in alignment.
That's right.
To that. So if I think, and empathy, I think, can come into, you don't have to agree to everybody, but at least you can create a platform where everybody is free to express themselves. And you acknowledge, at least, even if you don't agree to it, you acknowledge that, hey, thank you. Well, your opinion is great. However, the decisions we made or I made is for the collective good. And
that's right. Yes.
So excellent. I think that pretty much covers up the things I wanted to talk about. And I believe most important thing I wanted to talk about is about leadership and how people can shed that lack of confidence and just break that ice and go ahead and express themselves, make mistakes along the way. And obviously, I believe you've made some mistakes, and everybody makes mistakes, and you, how quickly you learn from that and probably not repeat it again, and move ahead and lead people, I guess, and be more confident.
Well, I think the best thing about being a student, particularly international student, is where you can afford to make mistakes. What do I mean by that is, when you're in student life, you mainly just deal with your lectures, your study. Of course, some of you may be undertaking some part-time work, and but what I'm trying to say is, if you're already in your career, in your job, and if certain mistakes being made, it may cost you a job. Whereas with students, I think the consequences is probably less severe compared to when you're in your adulthood working. So what I'm trying to say is, it's important to people to understand that it's okay to make mistakes, particularly when you're a student. The question is how do you learn from it as a lesson? I always tell students, particularly international students, is that don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Because that's how you learn.
Yes.
From it. In fact, in 2013, when I won the New South Wales International Student of the Year award, they took a video about me saying a few words. That was exactly the message that I said at the end of the video. Don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Yes.
Because that's how you learn.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I believe that has happened to me in my life as well. And mistakes and how quickly you learn from it, those are the greatest teachers, you know, because your own experience would be, you know, incomparable to what you study in textbooks or whatever. And then you have all these theories in your head, like how to, you know, get ahead with lack of confidence and this and that. And unless you're in that situation and you don't come out yourself and experience it, I believe it wouldn't be as valuable as, you know, you'd study about it or you learn about it. So, well, I think this has been an excellent session. I really, really appreciate Thompson for you being here and sharing your story to all our listeners out there. And well, I hope we can do this again in future as well. If you know, we can find another topic to I'm sure we can find certain more topics because you've been involved in a lot of other fields as well. But thank you very much, Thompson.
Well, thank you for having me, and it has been a pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you, Thompson.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.